The Reconquista, the 781-year war. Think about the longest wars you've ever heard of. The 30 Years' War, the 80 Years' War, even the so-called 100 Years' War, which, in reality, dragged on for 116 years. Now, forget all of them, because none of those wars, no matter how brutal, no matter how famous, come anywhere close to what you're about to hear. This was not a war of decades. It was not even a war of centuries. It lasted 781 years. 7 centuries of blood. 7 centuries of shifting borders, broken alliances, and endless ambition. Imagine being born into a world where war is already normal, growing up knowing nothing else, and dying without ever seeing peace. Now imagine that happening for nearly 30 generations. This wasn't just a conflict between kingdoms. It wasn't just about land. It was a slow, relentless collision between two worlds. Faith against faith, empire against survival, power against identity. This was the Reconquista, and it would shape not only Spain, but the future of the entire world. The story begins in the year 711. At that time, the Iberian Peninsula, modern-day Spain and Portugal, was ruled by the Visigoths. From the outside, they looked powerful. They had territory, wealth, and a long-standing kingdom. But inside, everything was falling apart. The nobles were divided. The throne was unstable. Betrayal had become a political tool. It was not a kingdom standing strong. It was a kingdom waiting to collapse. And just across a narrow stretch of water to the south, an empire was watching. The Umayyad Caliphate. At its peak, it stretched from the Atlantic Ocean all the way to the distant lands of Persia. It was one of the greatest superpowers the world had ever seen. In 711, it made its move. Leading the invasion was a Berber general named Tariq ibn Ziyad. He did not come with a massive army. He did not come with overwhelming numbers. He came with around 7,000 men. They crossed the strait and landed on a massive rocky cliff, a place that would later be named after him, Gibraltar. But what happened next would turn this invasion into legend. Tariq ordered the ships to be burned. Not hidden, not guarded, burned. Flames rose behind his army. Smoke filled the air. There would be no retreat. Then he addressed his men. Behind you is the sea. Before you is the enemy. You have nothing left. But your faith and your swords, there was only one path left. Forward. When the Visigothic king Roderick heard of the invasion, he rushed south to confront it. But his greatest problem wasn't the enemy in front of him. It was the betrayal within his own ranks. Several powerful nobles had already turned against him. Some refused to fight. Others actively sabotaged the battle. So when the two armies finally clashed, the Visigothic army didn't just lose, it collapsed from the inside. King Roderick disappeared in the chaos. Some say he drowned while trying to escape. Others believe he was cut down on the battlefield. No one knows for sure, but one thing is certain. In just 7 years, a kingdom that had stood for over 3 centuries was completely erased. In its place rose a new power, Al-Andalus. The conquest moved with terrifying speed. City after city fell. Region after region surrendered. Soon, almost the entire Iberian Peninsula was under Muslim control. But the momentum didn't stop there. The armies pushed north, crossing the Pyrenees Mountains, entering the heart of what is now France. Too many had felt unstoppable, like nothing could stand in its way, until the year 732, until a man known only as the Hammer stepped forward, Charles Martel. The two forces met near Tours, but instead of charging into battle immediately, something strange happened. They waited 4 days, then nearly a full week. Both sides stood in silence, watching, measuring, waiting for the other to make the first mistake. Then finally, the attack came. The Umayyad cavalry surged forward with full force, fast, powerful, and confident. But what they hit was not what they expected. It wasn't a scattered army. It wasn't a panicked defense. It was a wall, a solid, disciplined wall of infantry. Men who did not break, men who did not run. They stood their ground and absorbed the impact. Wave after wave crashed into them and failed. At some point in the chaos, the Muslim commander was killed, and just like that, the momentum shattered. Under the cover of night, the army withdrew. For the first time, the expansion had been stopped. The tide had turned, even if only for a moment. But further south, something remarkable was happening. Al-Andalus was not collapsing. It was thriving. Its cities became centers of knowledge, science, and culture. Cordoba alone had paved roads, public lighting, and libraries containing hundreds of thousands of books. At a time when much of Europe was still struggling in darkness, it was, in many ways, the most advanced society in Europe. But prosperity carries a hidden danger. It breeds pride, and pride often leads to division. Over time, the unified caliphate began to fracture. It split into dozens of smaller kingdoms known as the Tibets, and this is where the story takes a strange and almost tragic turn. These rulers began to fight each other, not just politically, but militarily, and to win those wars. They hired Christian mercenaries. They paid their enemies. to destroy each other. They were feeding the very force that would one day erase them. The breaking point came in the year 1212, the Battle of Las Navas de Tolosa. For generations, the Christian kingdoms in the north had been divided, fighting each other, competing for power. But this time, something changed. They united Castile, Aragon, Navarre. For once, they were not rivals. They were one force. And what followed was not just another battle. It was a decisive blow. A moment where centuries of tension finally exploded. The Christian coalition broke through the enemy defenses, stormed the heart of the camp, and shattered the power of Al-Andalus from that point on. The outcome was no longer uncertain. It was inevitable. The great cities began to fall. Cordoba in 1236, a symbol of culture and knowledge, gone Seville in 1248, another pillar collapsed. The map of Muslim Spain shrank year by year, until only one final kingdom remained, Granada. Granada did not survive through strength, it survived through strategy. Its rulers paid tribute, they made deals. They balanced carefully between survival and submission. For nearly 200 years, they held on. But time was not on their side. By the late 15th century, a new power had emerged in the north. Two crowns united. Ferdinand of Aragon, Isabella of Castile. Together, they didn't just rule, they built something new. A unified Spain, stronger, more organized, more determined than ever before. In 1492, they launched the final campaign. The war that had lasted nearly 8 centuries was about to end. Granada fell. Its last ruler, Muhammad XII, known as Boabdil, surrendered the city. He handed over the keys, and as he left, he turned back one last time, looking at the land he had lost, and he wept. Legend says his mother spoke to him in that moment. Do not weep like a child, for what you could not defend like a man. And just like that, after 781 years, it was over. The crescent fell, the cross rose. Spain was whole. But here's what most people don't realize. 1492 was not just an ending, it was a beginning. Because in that exact same year, a man named Christopher Columbus set sail under the Spanish flag. He carried with him the same spirit that had driven centuries of war across Iberia: ambition, faith, and the desire to conquer the unknown. What had been forged in 781 years of conflict was now about to be unleashed on an entirely new world.